So, if you were listening or reading up front, when Brooke and Kinley read, they read a scripture about trusting in God. So what does it mean to truly trust in God? Does anybody know what it means to truly trust in God? So in that scripture, can you bring the scripture back up, Christy, back to there? Way back up, yeah, to the beginning. One more there. Or way past. There we go. Okay. So in that scripture, it says, when we are told that we trust in God, we are like a tree with strong, healthy roots. So it says, blessed are those who trust in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord. They shall be like a tree planted by water, sending out its roots by the stream. So just like a tree with strong, healthy roots, when we are rooted in faith to God, we are able to withstand the storms of life. Okay, so I want each of you to stand up. So go ahead and stand up. Okay, spread out just a little. David, come on, stand up. Stand up. Let's participate. No, stand up and stay standing up. Participate. Spread out just a little bit. I want us to feel like what it would be like to be a strongly rooted tree. Okay, so to begin, put your feet together like this. Stand your feet together like that. Okay, put your arms at your sides. Stay like that. Now close your eyes. Keep them closed. Okay. Try lifting one of your feet slowly and placing the bottom of that foot on the ankle of your other leg. Okay. Now, after you do that, bring your hands above your head. Keep your eyes closed while you do it. Put them above your head, not on your head, but bring your eyes above your head. While you do that, try to do that. To both your hands. Now keep your leg up on your ankle. Make sure your leg is up on your ankle, and put your hands above. You gotta do both at the same time. Put your. Okay. Are you having trouble doing that? Was that hard to do?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's try something else. Let's keep your eyes open. Okay. Now do the same thing. Put your foot on your ankle, and now see if you can put your hands above, and see if it's a little easier with your eyes open. Okay. Was it easier with your eyes open? A little bit easier? Okay. So when you close your eyes, it's like closing. You go ahead and sit down. Okay. When you close your eyes, you're basically saying you're closing your eyes to God, keeping your eyes open, or keeping your eyes open to the faith in God. So when you close your eyes, it's like losing that faith in God, losing the faith in that God is going to keep you. You start wobbling. And so that's kind of an analogy. You can think of that when you start to lose faith. You want to keep your eyes open and keep them on God. So remember, sometimes hard things will happen in life and we will wobble. But when we're rooted in our faith in God, we can remain balanced and steady. So I want to read you a story about some teenagers who had trust in God. And you probably heard this story, and where you probably heard this story is through VeggieTales. So, but I don't have the VeggieTales version. I have the version from the Bible. King Nebuchadnezzar made a golden statue whose height was 60 cubits tall and width was 6 cubits. Now, a cubit is about 1.5 feet. So that would make it 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. So it was a pretty big statue. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Now, Babylon is where like Iraq area is today. The king Nebuchadnezzar sent for satraps, prefects, governors, counselors, treasurers, justices, magistrates, and the officials of the province to assemble and come to the dedication of the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Now, some of those words you're probably familiar with, governors, counselors, treasurers, but I wasn't familiar with what a satrap was. Satraps are provincial governors of ancient Persian empires. A prefect was just an administrative leader of that time. But King Nebuchadnezzar wanted them all to come together to the dedication of this statue that he had built. Really tall statue. Think of when I read about it, they think of described like the Washington Monument. If you think of what the Washington Monument looks like, but it's really tall, maybe not as tall as Washington Monument, but it's a really tall and thin statue. So he was sending for all these leaders in Babylon. So why do you think he wanted all the leaders in Babylon to come and see his statue? Anybody know why he would want to do that? So when he was worshiping, or he wanted them to take a loyalty oath. It's like worshiping the statue would be a loyalty oath to the king. He wanted everyone to show that they were loyal to him as the king. So the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces assembled for the dedication of the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. When they were standing before the statue that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, the herald, which is an official messenger, proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and the entire musical ensemble, you are all to fall down and worship the golden statue that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship immediately will be thrown into a burning furnace of blazing fire." Therefore, as soon as all the people heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and the entire musical ensemble, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Okay, so if someone told one of you that you heard all of those musical instruments, that you were to bow down and worship this statue, what would you do? Any of you, what would you do if you were told that you had to worship this statue? Would you all worship the statue? Any of you?
I'll try to find how I got to this place to go back home.
You try to go back home, okay? At that time, it was against Jewish law to worship idols, and they would consider a statue like that an idol. But I'm sure there's people who did not want to be thrown into a burning fire. So you had this conflict between what was the Jewish law and what was the law of the king. Or you could think of it, this was God's law versus man's law. And so I'm sure there were people there that had a conflict like, I don't want to defy God, but if I don't defy God, then I'm going to be thrown into fire and probably burned to death. So it was definitely a dilemma for some people. So accordingly, at this time, certain Chaldeans, and what a Chaldean was is it referred to people of Babylonia. They were specifically from the southern part of Babylonia, but at this time the Chaldeans came forward and they denounced the Jews. They didn't really like the Jews, let's just say that. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and the entire musical ensemble shall fall down and worship the golden statue, and whoever does not fall down and worship shall be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. But there are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon." Does anybody remember who those Jews were? If you heard this story? Bonnie knows who they are. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. "These pay no heed to you, O king. They do not serve your gods, and they do not worship the golden statue that you have set up." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were just minding their own business. They weren't doing anything, but they basically weren't bowing down to the statue when all of these musical instruments. Now, does anybody remember all those musical instruments I just mentioned?
Horns.
You said horn? Horn was one of them, yeah. Horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and then they say the entire musical ensemble. But they were minding their own business, and these Chaldeans, basically tattled on them. That's what they did. They said, these 3 young men are not bowing down to you. So we're going to go tell the king that they're not bowing down to them. So King Nebuchadnezzar heard this from the Chaldeans. What do you think the king's reaction was? Do you think he was happy about that and said, okay, you're fine, you're not bothering us? Or do you think he was upset about this?
No.
You don't think he was upset?
It's like, just send him to fire. Simple.
Well, Nebuchadnezzar was in a furious rage. So he commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought in. So they brought those men in before the king. Now Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it mentioned that they were men in the Bible, but they were actually probably teenagers. When they say men back then, Jewish boys were considered men at age 13. And other versions say young men in the Bibles. And a lot of scholars believe they were possibly around 15 years old. So imagine at some of you who are around that age or have been that age and faced with this dilemma of whether you defy God or whether you defy the king, and which one you'd want to choose. It's a very hard decision. Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods, and you do not worship the golden statue that I have set up? Now if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and the entire musical ensemble, to fall down and worship the statue I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. And who is this God that will deliver you out of my hands?" So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to present a defense to you in this matter. If our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of the blazing fire and out of your hand, O king, let him deliver us. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your God, and we will not worship the golden statue that you have set up." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they basically told the king, we're not going to worship your statue. We only worship God. And they worship their God, which is our God. So earlier, remember, the king was filled with rage. But he was filled with rage only based on hearsay. He was filled with rage just because someone told him that these 3 young men were not going to worship it. He had actually had firsthand knowledge. Now he had firsthand knowledge. Specifically, they told him to his face that they were not going to worship his statue. So that made Nebuchadnezzar even more angry than he was before. So he was so filled with rage against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his face was distorted. Do any of y'all ever get so mad that your face just gets really distorted, like you get really angry like this? Do any of y'all do that? I see some of your parents shaking their head yes. That yes, you do get so mad that your face gets distorted.
AJ.
Yes,
You do. I'm guessing AJ.
Yeah. Okay. So his face was distorted. He probably had this really mad look on his face like that and was really distorted. So he ordered the furnace to be heated up 7 times more than was customary. And he ordered some of the strongest guards in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to throw them into the furnace of blazing fire. So he didn't just want them to throw into a regular fire. He wanted it to be 7 times more hot than a regular fire. I mean, the regular fire would probably burn them, but this was 7 times more hot. And he made sure to get his strongest guards to throw them into there. So even if he thought they were going to fight this, his strongest guards were going to make sure that they got thrown into the fire. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were bound up, still wearing their tunics, their trousers, their hats, and other garments, and they were thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. So what do you think happened to them? They answered the king, "True, O king." Oh, sorry. I skipped a little. Because the king's command was urgent, and because the furnace was so overheated, the raging flames killed the guards who had lifted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But the 3 men fell down, still bound, into the furnace of blazing fire, but they survived. King Nebuchadnezzar was so astonished, he rose up quickly. He said to his counselors, Was it not 3 men who were thrown bound into the fire? They answered the king, "True, O king." He replied, "But I see 4 men unbound." Who do you think was the 4th man?
Jesus.
Okay. Well, this was the Old Testament, so Jesus or God or somebody.
Well, Jesus has been like referenced in the Old Testament like so many times.
So he replied, "But I see 4 men unbound walking in the middle of the fire." So not only were they fell down bound in the fire, they bound up. Not only were they safe in the fire, they were now unbound. And they saw a 4th man, probably Jesus. But he says, "I see 4 men unbound walking in the middle of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the 4th has the appearance of a god." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the door of the furnace of blazing fire and said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. The hairs of their heads were not even singed. Their tunics were not harmed, and they did not even smell of fire when they came out. Nebuchadnezzar said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. They had disobeyed the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God." So what had happened to the king? Had he changed from the rage? So he said, "Therefore I made a decree. Any people, nation, or language that utters blasphemy against God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb." Okay, now, he did change to say, okay, now he worships this God, but maybe he didn't completely change, because now he's just saying you have to worship God, but he still is saying anybody else is still he's gonna kill. But he is accepting that that the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is the one to worship. He says, "Shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins, and there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So now think back to this at the beginning when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were faced with this dilemma. Do you think they knew that God was going to save them from the fire? But what did they do? Back to our scripture at the beginning. It says, "Blessed are those who trust in the Lord, whose trust is in the Lord." The next verse is, "It shall not fear when the heat comes." They did not fear when the heat came. So remember when we talked about being rooted in your faith and trusting God? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had ultimate trust in God. They trusted in God more than probably any of us have ever trusted in God. But when we think about how much we trust in God, do we trust in God enough to stand up for what is wrong? It was wrong to worship the statue. There are times when we're going to be faced with things that are wrong. It might be popular. It was popular to worship the statue, but it was wrong. We may not be thrown into a fiery furnace for standing up for what is right, But sometimes for standing up for what is right means that people might make fun of us or exclude us from activities or say hateful things to us. We might be tempted to give in and do the wrong thing to make people like us. But if we are rooted in faith and trust in God, we'll be able to stand up for what is right.